I'm Amanda Pierce, 32 years old, born and raised in Miami. My life revolves around gems and jewelry, just like my parents and grandparents did. Pierce Gems, our family's boutique jewelry store, sits pretty in Miami's fancy shopping district. It's not just a store, it's my whole world. Growing up, I spent more time in the workshop than I did in playgrounds. While other kids were learning to ride bikes, I was learning to cut stones. My dad would sit me on his lap, his big, calloused hands guiding my smaller ones as we worked on a piece together. "Remember, Mandy," he'd say, his voice gruff but kind. "It's not just about making something pretty. It's about creating something that tells a story. Our family has a secret. No, we're not secretly royalty or anything like that. It's a technique for processing gems that makes them shine like nothing you've ever seen. This secret's been passed down for 3 generations, and it's what makes Pierce Gems special. Guard this secret with your life, Amanda," my dad told me on my 21st birthday. "It's not just our past, it's our future." And I did. I guarded it fiercely. It was my responsibility, my burden, and my ticket to success in a world that often didn't take a young woman seriously. Pierce Gems wasn't just successful, it was thriving. We had a loyal clientele who appreciated the unique brilliance of our pieces. Other jewelers tried to figure out our secret, but none came close. The Gemstone Society's annual gala was always a glitzy affair, but that year, it felt different. Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was the way my new emerald dress hugged my curves, but I felt electric that night. I made my way through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces and exchanging pleasantries. The room was a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, everyone dripping in jewels that probably cost more than my first car. "Amanda, darling, you look fabulous," gushed Marjorie, one of our regular clients. She grabbed my hands, her eyes zeroing in on the ring I was wearing. "Is this one of your new pieces? It's stunning." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Just finished it last week. It's part of our new Midnight Sky collection." "I simply must have one," Marjorie declared. "I'll stop by the shop next week." As she fluttered off to gossip with her friends, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and found myself face to face with the most captivating pair of blue eyes I'd ever seen. "Excuse me," said the owner of those eyes, flashing a smile that could melt ice. I couldn't help but overhear. "You're Amanda Pierce, aren't you?" I nodded, suddenly feeling tongue-tied. "That's me. And you are?" "Jason Randfield," he replied, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard great things about your work." Randfield. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. The Randfields were jewelry royalty, owners of one of the largest jewelry empires in the country. And here was their heir, talking to me like I was the most interesting person in the room. "The pleasure's all mine," I managed to say, shaking his hand. I didn't realize the Randfields would be here tonight. Jason laughed, a rich, warm sound that made me feel like we were sharing an inside joke. "We usually skip these events, but I insisted on coming this year. I've been following your work, Amanda. You're making waves in the industry." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "That's very kind of you to say." "It's the truth," he said, his eyes twinkling. "In fact, I was hoping we could discuss a potential collaboration. How about dinner next week?" My heart skipped a beat. A collaboration with the Randfields could take Pierce Gems to the next level. But a small voice in the back of my head whispered a warning. The Randfields were our biggest competitors. Could they be trusted? I pushed the thought aside. This was business, nothing more. "Dinner sounds great," I heard myself say. Jason's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant set it up." He glanced over my shoulder and frowned slightly. "I'm afraid I have to mingle, but I'm looking forward to our dinner, Amanda." As he walked away, I felt like I was floating. Jason Randfield had sought me out. Me, Amanda Pierce, the girl who spent more time with gems than people. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I danced, I laughed, I networked. But my mind kept drifting back to those blue eyes and that dazzling smile. Jason had chosen a trendy restaurant in South Beach, the kind of place where the who's who of Miami came to see and be seen. As I walked in, I spotted him immediately, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. He stood up as I approached, his eyes lighting up. "Amanda," he said, taking my hand. "You look stunning." I felt a flutter in my stomach, but pushed it down. "Thank you, Jason. You clean up pretty well yourself." As we sipped our wine, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about our shared passion for jewelry, swapping stories about difficult clients and challenging designs. I found myself relaxing, drawn in by Jason's wit and charm. "So," I said, as our main courses arrived. "You mentioned a potential collaboration at the gala. What did you have in mind?" Jason leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been following your work for a while now, Amanda. The way you bring out the brilliance in gems, it's unlike anything I've seen before. I think a partnership between Pierce Gems and Randfield Jewelry could revolutionize the industry." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold statement. How exactly would this partnership work?" "We have the resources and the reach," Jason explained. "You have the skill and the innovation. Together, we could create a line that combines the best of both our worlds." It sounded tempting, I had to admit. But years of protecting our family secret made me cautious. "And what about our individual techniques? Our trade secrets?" Jason held up his hands. "Those would remain separate, of course. This would be about combining our strengths, not revealing our secrets." I nodded slowly, turning the idea over in my mind. "It's an interesting proposition. I'd need to think about it, discuss it with my team." "Of course," Jason said, his smile understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As dinner progressed, our conversation drifted from business to more personal topics. Jason told me about growing up in the shadow of the Randfield Empire, the pressure to live up to his family name. I found myself opening up about my own experiences, the weight of carrying on the Pierce legacy. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other regularly. Jason swept me off my feet with grand gestures and intimate moments. One weekend, he surprised me with a spontaneous trip to the Bahamas. "Pack a bag," he said, showing up at my door with a mischievous grin. "We're going on an adventure." I hesitated, thinking about the orders I needed to fill. "Jason, I can't just leave. I have work." He silenced me with a kiss. "The work will be there when you get back." "When's the last time you took a break, Amanda?" I couldn't remember, and that realization made me pause. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did need a break. The Bahamas were like a dream. We spent our days lounging on pristine beaches, snorkeling in crystal clear waters, and our nights dancing under the stars. It was intoxicating, being the center of Jason's attention. Back in Miami, our relationship continued to blossom. Jason would surprise me with rare orchids flown in from Thailand, their delicate petals reminding me of his thoughtfulness. We'd spend evenings at fancy restaurants or quiet nights in, talking for hours about everything and nothing. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first time Jason took me to meet his parents, I felt like I'd stepped into a lion's den. Vivian Randfield, Jason's mother, looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "So, you're the little jeweler Jason's been spending so much time with," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "That's right. Amanda Pierce of Pierce Gems. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Randfield." Robert Randfield, Jason's father, was a bit warmer, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. "Pierce Gems," he mused. "You've been making quite a name for yourselves lately. Impressive for such a small operation." The dinner was a minefield of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled insults. At one point, Vivian accidentally spilled her red wine on my dress. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, not sounding sorry at all. I suppose your hands must be too rough from all that manual labor to hold delicate glassware properly. I plastered on a smile even as I seethed inside. No worries, Mrs. Randfield. Accidents happen. Jason squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Later, as he drove me home, he apologized profusely. I'm so sorry about my parents, he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. They can be difficult. I sighed, looking out at the Miami skyline. It's okay. I'm sure they're just protective of you. Jason shook his head. It's not okay. You're important to me, Amanda. They need to accept that. His words warmed my heart, pushing away the lingering chill from his parents' cold reception. As weeks turned into months, I found myself falling harder for Jason. He was everything I'd never known I wanted, charming, worldly, and seemingly head over heels for me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and appreciated for more than just my craft. We'd been dating for about 8 months when he surprised me with a trip to Paris. Pack your bags, darling, he said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. We're off to the city of love. And so I found myself in Paris, strolling hand in hand with Jason along the Seine, marveling at the architecture, and indulging in decadent French cuisine. It was like a dream. On our last night in Paris, Jason took me to dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant with a view of the Eiffel Tower. As we finished our dessert, he suddenly looked nervous. Amanda, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. These past months have been the happiest of my life. I can't imagine my life without you. He stood up, and to my shock, got down on one knee beside our table. The other diners gasped and turned to watch. Amanda Pierce, Jason said, pulling out a small velvet box. Will you marry me? I stared at the ring in shock. It was beautiful, but a small part of me couldn't help but notice that it paled in comparison to my own creations. I pushed that thought aside, focusing instead on the man kneeling before me, his eyes full of hope and love. Yes, I heard myself say. Yes, I'll marry you. When we returned to Miami, reality came crashing back. Jason's parents insisted on throwing us an engagement party, and I found myself thrust into a world of high society that I'd only ever observed from the outside. The party was a lavish affair at the Randfield mansion. As I circulated among Miami's elite, I couldn't help but feel out of place. These people lived in a different world than I did, a world of old money and ingrained privilege. Vivian Randfield cornered me by the champagne fountain, her smile as sharp as a diamond-tipped saw. Amanda, darling, I must say, we were all quite surprised when Jason announced your engagement. It's not often a Randfield marries outside our social circle. Before I could respond, Jason appeared at my side, placing a protective arm around my waist. Mother, I hope you're not giving Amanda a hard time. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, darling. I was just welcoming Amanda to the family. Later that night, as Jason and I slow danced under the crystal chandeliers, he leaned in close. I have an idea, he whispered. Why don't you make a special piece for my mother? As a peace offering. Show her what you can do. I hesitated. The Pierce family secret wasn't something I shared lightly, even with my fiancé. But maybe Jason was right. Maybe this could be a way to bridge the gap between our two worlds. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of wedding planning. I threw myself into creating the perfect necklace for Vivian, hoping it would be the olive branch that could finally win her over. I spent countless hours in my workshop, pouring my heart and soul into the piece. I used rare pink diamonds and a flawless blue sapphire from my father's private collection. It was to be my masterpiece, a testament to my skill and the Pierce family secret. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on the clasp, Jason stopped by the workshop. His eyes widened. Amanda, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I felt a surge of pride. Do you think your mother will like it? Jason nodded, his eyes still fixed on the necklace. She'd be a fool not to. The way it catches the light, it's almost otherworldly. I smiled, pleased with his reaction. That's the Pierce touch. The next week, I was at the Randfield mansion for another wedding planning session. Suddenly, I heard raised voices coming from down the hall. I slipped out of the room and followed the sound of the voices. As I got closer, I could make out what they were saying. "You're being ridiculous, Jason," came Robert's deep voice. "This marriage is a golden opportunity. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet now." "It's not like that," Jason protested. But nothing," Vivian's shrill voice cut in. "You've done well, darling. She's eating out of the palm of your hand. Soon, we'll have everything we need." I edged closer to the partially open door, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the crack, I could see Jason pacing back and forth, sipping wine from a glass. "You should see how eagerly she's making that necklace," he said, and I felt my world tilt on its axis. "She has no idea she's handing over the keys to her entire legacy." Vivian's laugh pierced the air like a knife. "And to think, we almost objected to you marrying that little nobody. I must say, Jason, your acting skills have improved tremendously. She actually believes you love her." I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a mistake. But Robert's next words shattered any lingering doubt. "Once we have the Pierce secret, we'll corner the market," he said, his voice filled with smug satisfaction. "Who cares if her quaint little shop goes under? It's just business, after all." I felt like I was going to be sick. My vision blurred with unshed tears as the full weight of their betrayal hit me. Jason, the man I thought I loved, the man I had agreed to marry, had been using me all along. The days following my shocking discovery were a blur of emotions and careful planning. On the surface, I played the part of the excited bride-to-be perfectly. I gushed over flower arrangements, fretted about seating charts, and continued work on Vivian's necklace. But inside, I was seething with rage and plotting my revenge. "How's the necklace coming along, darling?" Jason asked one evening, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I worked in my studio. I fought the urge to flinch away from his touch. "Almost done," I replied, forcing a smile. "Your mother is going to love it." Late into the night, after Jason had gone home, I began creating a new collection. Each piece was a work of art, telling the story of betrayal through intricate designs and carefully chosen gems. But jewelry wasn't my only focus. One day, I broke into Jason's home computer and downloaded all the files I could find. I spent hours poring over the Randfield Company documents, looking for any discrepancies or signs of wrongdoing. It was tedious work, but my determination fueled me. One night, as I was going through a stack of financial reports, something caught my eye. The Randfields had been systematically replacing high-quality gems with cheaper alternatives in their jewelry, scamming their customers out of millions. The next challenge was gathering evidence of their plot against me. I bought a small, high-quality recording device and began carrying it with me everywhere. It felt dirty, but I reminded myself that they had started this game. I was just finishing it. As the final week before the wedding arrived, I put the finishing touches on my plan. I had evidence of the Randfields' gem scam, recordings of their plot against me, and a collection that would shock Miami's elite to its core. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect Miami day. As I arrived at the beachfront venue, my heart was pounding, but my resolve was firm. I clutched my velvet-lined case, containing my new collection and all the evidence I'd gathered, like a lifeline. "Amanda, there you are." Jason's best man, Mark, called out as I entered. "Everyone's been looking for you. Are you ready?" I gave him a tight smile. "More ready than you know." As I was ushered into a private room to wait, I could hear the murmur of guests arriving outside. Miami's elite, all gathered to witness what they thought would be the society wedding of the year. If only they knew. The wedding march began to play, and I started my walk down the aisle. Faces turned to watch me, smiling and expectant. I saw Vivian and Robert in the front row, looking smug and satisfied. Jason waited at the altar, beaming at me. But as I reached the altar, instead of taking Jason's hand, I turned to face the assembled guests. "I'm afraid there won't be a wedding today," I announced, my voice clear and strong. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Jason's face contorted in confusion. "Amanda, what are you doing?" I ignored him, addressing the guests instead. "Instead, I'll be unveiling my newest collection, The Art of Betrayal." With that, I opened my case and began to pull out the pieces one by one, explaining the symbolism behind each one. The snake bracelet, representing deceit. The shattered diamond ring, symbolizing broken trust. The color-changing teardrop earrings, reflecting the shifting nature of lies. As I spoke, I saw understanding and horror dawn on the Randfields' faces. But I wasn't done yet. "And for the grand finale," I said, pulling out Vivian's necklace, "a special commission with a hidden message." I held it up to the light, revealing the word liar spelled out in pink diamonds. The crowd gasped again, this time in a mix of shock and admiration. "Amanda, stop this nonsense right now," Robert Randfield bellowed, his face red with anger. But I was beyond stopping. I pulled out the documents I'd gathered, the recordings I'd made. "The Randfields aren't just liars in love," I announced. "They're liars in business too." I proceeded to lay out the evidence of their gem scam, playing recordings of their plot against me and Pierce Gems. With each revelation, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, shocked faces turning to the Randfields for explanation. "This is preposterous," Vivian shrieked, but her voice was shaking. As security began to escort the sputtering Randfields out, I addressed the crowd one final time. "I stand before you not as a bride, but as a businesswoman protecting her legacy. Pierce Gems will continue to create beauty and brilliance, without compromising our integrity." The aftermath was chaos. Reporters who had come to cover a society wedding found themselves with a much bigger story. Photos of my triumphant face and stunning jewelry splashed across social media and magazines worldwide. In the days following what the press dubbed the wedding that wasn't, my life became a whirlwind of interviews, legal meetings, and damage control. The story had exploded beyond Miami, capturing national attention. My phone rang nonstop with calls from reporters, industry insiders, and even a few Hollywood producers interested in my story. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by half-finished pieces and stacks of newspapers, all featuring my face on the front page. The headlines ranged from "Jewel of Deception," "Heiress Exposes $1 Million Scam," to "Love, Lies, and Luxury, the Pierce Randfield Saga." The Randfield empire crumbled under the weight of the scandal, with multiple lawsuits filed against them. My best friend and now lawyer, Sarah, burst through the door, her arms full of more newspapers and legal documents. "Amanda," she said, dropping everything on my workbench. "We need to talk strategy. The press is having a field day, and we've got at least a dozen interview requests." Over the next few weeks, I carefully chose which interviews to give. I spoke about the importance of transparency in the jewelry business, the need for stricter regulations, and my vision for a more ethical industry. As the weeks turned into months, the media frenzy began to die down, but my resolve only grew stronger. I channeled my energy into Pierce Gems, pushing myself to create more innovative designs while maintaining our commitment to ethical sourcing. One evening, as I was locking up the shop, a woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Ms. Pierce," she said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you." I tilted my head, confused. "Thank me? For what?" She smiled sadly. "I bought a Randfield piece for my 25th wedding anniversary. After your exposé, I had it appraised. Turns out, the stone wasn't nearly what they claimed it was. Thanks to you, I was able to get my money back." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I'm glad I could help." As she walked away, I realized that my actions had affected real people, not just faceless consumers. The scandal that had nearly destroyed me had instead become the catalyst for positive change. And I, Amanda Pierce, was just getting started.